Evil is real. That is the topic we are dealing with here on the Playing with Fire podcast. My name is Billy Hollowell. I'm an author, I'm a journalist, and I wrote a book called Playing with Fire, a modern investigation into demons, exorcism, and ghosts. Now, that book is a journalistic look at evil. It answers a number of questions. Does evil exist? What is evil? What does Scripture tell us about evil? And how is the church and culture dealing with this topic? Now, if you tuned into season 1 of the show, you heard some interesting things. We had some wild stories of hope, wild stories of people who had gone through the occult, they had faced the unthinkable, and they came out on the other side as believers in Jesus. Now, those journeys were edited together in a very creative way. Season 2 of the show is a little bit different. Season 2 of Playing with Fire, this is all about candid conversations. And today is no exception. We are going to be talking with Sarah. Now, Sarah has a crazy story. She was once a teen witch. Now, I know that sounds a little bit strange, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but there are a lot of people who are in this boat. Grew up as a witch, being taught that that was the way to live, and really transformed from a teen witch to a follower of Jesus. Now, we're going to talk with Sarah about her incredible story. We're going to have a long-form conversation because there's a lot to unpack, how she got there, what it meant, how she left that lifestyle, and where she is today. Welcome to Season 2 of the Playing with Fire podcast. With no further ado, let's welcome Sarah to the show. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. Your story caught my eye, and, just looking at the details of your story, finding faith, but the crazy journey that you were on as a young child. And I think we'll start, and I know some people might not be familiar with your story, so I want to start at this point when you were about 13 years old, where your family moved into this home that some might describe the home as, quote, haunted. Can you take us through that experience of moving into the house and when you started to sort of notice that things were going on there?
So I grew up very much a nomad. My dad moved us around all the time. So moving into this house was kind of a big deal. And of course, it happening at 13 when I had left Jersey at that point. I was in New Jersey, and we moved across the bay into Delaware. And so just moving to this spot, for me, that house, my dad had said that we were going to stay, which of course, was a big deal when you have gone to 12, 14 different, I don't even know how many schools, honestly, at that point in my life. I was going into 8th grade, and I had been all over up and down the East Coast and everything else. So the thought that we were going to stay was actually my first big attachment to this house, is okay, I might actually live here. I might be able to actually stay.
That's
And
exciting, I would imagine,
it
at that
was.
point. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
And I always had hope that we would be able to stay. I always thought, maybe this will be the place. And it never was. But we had better potential. I had better hope this time because my dad had started a business of his own. He wasn't working for somebody else that he might say, I don't want to work here anymore, and then move us again. So he had his own business at that point. He was building his own thing. So I was like, okay, maybe this is for real. And of course we, at different times we were practically homeless, and poor and broke and everything else. And we were literally moving into the old governor's mansion of this place. So it was like this really bizarre kind of otherworldly thing. I couldn't even believe that we were going to be living there. And then at 13, I didn't understand financially how we could go from, these wild swings of we have no money to we have this. So it never made any sense to me. But my dad, from the beginning of introducing us to that house, the very first time I saw a brochure, and I still have the little brochure that he handed me about this house, he was insinuating that this was a special house and that there were things, he told me about the former owner and who was a governor of Delaware. And it just he hinted at it all along the way. And then when we moved there, he was like, this house is haunted. And of course he tells me this in excitement. That to him was awesome. He loved that. And so looking up to my dad and wanting a relationship with my dad, I went with it. I just went with it. So arriving there was very much very much a turning point in a lot of ways. And then, you know, that was the first time he really ever introduced the supernatural, or his interest in the supernatural, then. And you know, to be fully honest, there's lots and lots. I've done interviews with Christians, radio, stuff like that, and there's a lot of different feelings about haunting. And of course, I think people in the world have a different sense of it than people who
Sure.
are Christians. And a lot of Christians will discount it and say, well, it's just not real. And I think that that does a huge disservice to those people that have had very real supernatural experiences. Because there are, I do believe, I mean, fully, that there is a supernatural world around us that we cannot see. And so I don't you know, I have a lot of thoughts about, you know, ghosts and stuff. And there's at least one instance in the Bible where, you know, somebody comes back and stuff. And, you know, you can have a lot of opinions, and my theology on it doesn't really matter. But
Well,
there were
now
very,
you've got me so interested. So Playing with Fire, the book that I wrote
Mhm.
on this, the topic of infestation of a home,
Yeah.
right, was something that was really interesting because obviously Christians, the vast majority, believe in demons and evil,
Mhm.
and for a lot of Christians, their theology on it would be that people don't come back from the dead or
Right.
haunt. It's demons that are haunting, right? So when you talk about a haunting, that they would see it as that, but
Yeah.
some people still would reject that a place could have that happen, and yet we do have a lot of accounts from, you know, people where they feel as though it is the location, not necessarily the person who's being afflicted. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting topic that you sort
Yeah.
of, you know, broached there. It really is.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've done a ton of research on it. I mean, not just because of my background and my desire to help Christians understand this world, because I think one of the biggest issues I see in the American church nowadays is that there is this, it's like this, not rejection of it. I think most people like will say that they believe that there's a supernatural world, but they don't really understand anything about it. And that there are, you know, that there's this whole world that actually has motives and things that they're actually and actively doing. I mean, it's no different than what we see with, you know, we're coming up on Easter, you know, Jesus, you know, died on the cross. But, you know, the enemy had a plan in that too. It's just Jesus, you know, Christ's plan and his death on the cross was a greater plan than what the enemy had thought it was doing. But we
Yeah.
do have a thinking enemy. And so,
Ephesians 6. I mean, Ephesians 6 tells us,
yeah,
I would actually argue, I think, and I'd love your take on this, and then we'll dive back into the home and the upbringing. But,
yeah,
you know, I sort of feel like this is an issue that Hollywood is talking about more than some churches are, right? I mean, there's two extremes. You could talk about
yeah,
only the issue of evil, or you could never talk about it. But I was disturbed by how many people don't want to talk about it. They'll say they believe it,
no,
they ignore it, and it's as though
no.
Ephesians 6 is just not something that we should even care about, right? That there's a battle going on. So I
I
don't know if you
know.
have any takes on that or reflections on that, but
No, I do. It's actually why I'm in LA. Is because, you know, I have, you know, I actually, my testimony story. The reason I asked you about how you found me was because a producer in Hollywood found me about 3.5 years ago for the same, you know, found the same little pieces and stuff like that, and contacted me about doing my story for a film or a TV show and stuff. And we spent a while developing a project and everything else. And I have talked to so many Christian producers, and we're talking like basically the usual suspects of Christian filmmaking.
sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
all the normal suspects, right? And every one of them was like, "Wow, that's an amazing story." Yeah, I'm not touching that. You know, that
But
was
isn't that, I mean,
it's
that to
yeah,
me is such a problem,
it's huge.
especially look at what is happening around us right now. I mean, we are
Yeah,
watching Ephesians 6 play out in people's lives and in
yeah,
our culture, and
yeah,
yet that's the approach that so many people in the church
yeah.
have. And in like the church portion of Hollywood, that's a major problem.
It is, and when I developed the story to tell it, I specifically developed it to talk to teens, because essentially what I have found over many years is that churches don't talk about this. in general. Like there's very, very few churches that you will find that will actually talk about the supernatural world in any way, shape, or form, much less that, hey, you actually have an enemy and you can open doors that allow him to have influence, all like these very core spiritual principles that are part of the kingdom of God that we see throughout scripture. They don't talk about it. And then every single time I have gotten the opportunity to speak at youth groups, and I have to tell you, a lot of churches are uncomfortable with me speaking at youth groups. Like I have, like my own kid's school did not invite me back after I talked, but I had that moment and I grabbed it because I was like, they have to hear this stuff because they're not hearing it from anyone else, and they're actually putting themselves in danger. And I can't even tell you how many kids have walked up to me at the end of me talking and saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea what I was messing with. And I was like,
Yeah.
because nobody told them and nobody taught them that.
And it's everywhere. You go to Barnes and Noble, the Ouija
Yeah,
boards. I mean, this stuff
yeah,
is mainstreamed. It's in every reality TV show. They go to psychics. I mean, this is part of our culture. There was an actress on TV the other day. I did an episode on it for the podcast talking about how she's really into trying to speak with spirits and she goes to graveyards. And I mean, this is, I mean, and people will laugh this off. It's
yeah.
not a laughing matter. It's a very
It's not.
real thing. It's a
It's
very real
life and death. I mean, it is actually life and death, and I don't think we take it seriously enough. And I'm not one of those people that's like, there's a devil behind every doorknob. I
Sure.
don't think that. But I think that there's a very balanced way that we have to approach the supernatural. And there's a TikTok trend about manifesting. Have you heard the word manifesting?
Yes. Yeah.
All over with kids and teens right now about manifesting their destiny. Well, that's just witchcraft, just in different terms. Like that's all that is. Like it's the same stuff. It never changes. It just changes words. It changes how we do it, things like that. But it's all the same thing. I mean, yes, we used a Ouija board, but guess what? You can summon a spirit or you can mess with that world
Sure.
without those things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and I
they're
see it
just
on
the
TikTok.
tools. They're just the tools that
Yeah.
attract you to it, but now TikTok is one of those tools. So, all right, I love this conversation's amazing for a million reasons. I mean, very few people even speak about these things though, too. I think
I
it's
know.
very bold of somebody to have gone through what you've gone through, and we're gonna get into more of that now, to then be willing to share it, because I was finding that as I was trying to find people as a journalist to talk with them about it, and I'm a lifelong Christian, there were a lot of Christians who had these amazing stories that they did not want to share because they were worried they'd look weird or people would think they were crazy, or
Yeah.
there was something holding them back. And I understand that, but if we don't talk about it, again, how do we bring people who are facing this, how do we protect them, but how do we also bring them healing? So let's
Yeah.
go back to,
Okay.
you move into this house,
Yep.
your dad starts to sort of divulge to you that there's like a little bit of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a history here with
Mhm.
kind of witchcraft and the occult, and that it's something he's obviously sort of proud of. And it sounds like he knew the house might have something going on with it. So take me through that and how this sort of started to form in you as a practice that you embraced.
So my dad, my dad definitely insinuated that there was stuff. My dad was very famous of hinting at stuff, but then not like fully explaining it. And much later, I actually like pushed him really hard. Just like, come on, tell me what you actually believed, because he was very cagey about it. And I don't, of course, because he was cagey, that made me want to know even more, to be honest.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
fascinated me all the more because I felt like he knew something that I didn't. And I did not, I mean, we really did. I grew up in a household kind of basically without God. Like it just, God was, I mean, my mom kind of went to church, but it was never anything that meant anything. And then of course my dad was very anti all that stuff. And of course I had a deeper connection with my dad, or wanted a deeper connection with my dad at the time. So he insinuated this stuff. He did actually. Um, so there was an incident with a marble that happened very early on when we moved in, and it was basically, if you can imagine, like a metal marble rolling across wood floor. That's kind of the sound of it. And so it was very clear sound, but not very loud necessarily. Um, and you would hear this sound in my house, like and so that connection with my dad and that marble was the very beginning. And I do think that there's some kind of, when you invite fear and that belief that it might be real, when you open that door to that, I think then you're very, very open to every creak, every this, every that. I had I definitely had tormenting dreams there, like in a way, that I never had in my life, kind of thing. Later, like later when I got deeper into the witchcraft, didn't start there. But so this marble, we would hear it, and my dad was like, "That was proof. That was the first proof that something was happening." And we would hear creaks, and we would hear strange noises, and we would. All right. So I believe all gifts of God are there with us, like regardless of the fact that I was from a non-Christian family, didn't know anything about God. He still created me, and so I've always felt like I was sensitive. I guess I would use the word sensitive, but now as a Christian I see that as more of a, that connection with God, that wanting to connect with something deeper. It was that inside of you that was always there. And so I saw that as this connection with witchcraft. And my dad introduced me to it, very specifically through a book that he handed me, when I started asking him more questions about, well, what do you think this is, and who, do you think this, what's happening in the house, and he handed me a book on witchcraft. It was a very old book, and I still remember what the cover looks like. I burned it later, so like I don't have, I don't know I
I
don't
was
even
going to
know the
say,
title of it, to be honest,
yeah.
because it got.
I was gonna say I'm sure you disposed of that later on, but
Yes,
that
no,
was sort of
all.
your first like text version of,
Yeah,
instead of handing a kid a Bible, here's this witchcraft book.
yeah,
Wow.
no. So I got handed a book on witchcraft, and I was like, "Tell me more. Where'd you get this?" Because my dad, I'd never seen my dad open a book in my entire life. So like, I was like, "You own a book? Like, why? How is that true?" And so, but he wouldn't tell me anything. Of course, he's like, "Just read the book. Just read the book. Just read the book." And I was like, "Fine, I'll read the book." And of course, it's a very old book. Like it's a very, very old book. So it's written in this old kind of style and stuff like that. And so that book, I was like, "Oh, I can learn about this through books." And of course, I was a student. I love reading. I've always loved reading, and so that led me to figuring out there was a New Age section in the bookstore, and I began just voraciously reading, and I would start to ask my dad questions. Like anytime I could, I'd start to ask my dad questions. It's like, "Well, I'm reading this, and what do you think about this?" And it was like he encouraged me without saying much. It's like, he was willing to talk and connect with me over that much more than my struggles in high school, or like, I didn't have any friends and was struggling with this or this, like that stuff. He just didn't even think. But if I brought up witchcraft, there was that
That was
connection.
the end. That was
That
the
was the
end.
in with my dad. And so I knew that I was onto something that he approved of. Like this was a good thing. And when I asked him, and I don't remember, it was probably I'd probably read a lot of books by that point, because that was the way you learned to do things pre-internet. You read books.
There was no Google. You just, yeah,
No
you
Google.
read. Yeah.
Thank goodness, honestly, because honestly, I think I would have had a much harder time getting out of it had that been around. So I'm actually very thankful that that did not exist when I got into this. But I asked him, I was reading this concept of what a true witch was, and about like whether it was real, like whether you were like destined, this like deep, like this is what your destiny and what you were meant to be, and that you were a true witch from a true line of witches and this kind of stuff. And I was reading about that, and I was like, I didn't know. And so I started asking my dad about that, and I don't remember the exact words that he used, but he was very much like, "No, you this is us. Like this is who we are as a family." And so it just kind of gave me this huge connection with my dad, and with identity, and with like this
It's
power.
generational. I mean, that's like a
Yes.
gener and in
Yes.
that moment with I would imagine you're viewing that as this heritage, this family
Yep.
heritage that you're continuing. It's a very positive
Yeah.
thing, and it's a very
Yeah.
positive quest, even though obviously it's not, but you don't realize that.
Nope.
Can I ask you a question about this? Because this is the thing, and I think people really will wonder this. You were a teenage witch, literally. I mean, we have had TV shows about this, right? Sitcoms about
Absolutely.
it, but you really lived this in real life. What
Mhm.
does that look like to be in the day to day a witch? Like, what does that identity look like in practice?
So it's very interesting, because I think a lot of people do have this like idea that they're like this goth look, and you wear all black, and it's this outer look, but it's actually like the farthest thing from the truth of what it was for me. First of all, I would say that it for me, my connection with that world was deeply personal to me. Like I really felt like I had like opened up this key of something that I was meant to do. And identity is huge, especially when you're a teenager. I mean, yes, it affects us at all stages of our life. But as a teenager, really looking for that identity and where you fit in, and this is a lane that I was meant to live in. That identity was huge for me as a teenager, and so nothing outwardly changed, I would say, other than a thing I wore a talisman thingy, a necklace. So other than the necklace, I looked the same probably and everything else, but I had an entire altar set up in my bedroom.
And what did you do with that?
Um, cast spells and entreated. Looked. There was a there's a lot of there is spell casting. I considered myself a good witch, which there are in the world. There's white witchcraft, which is considered this idea of there's this law of threefold return. And actually, if you study and learn about it, everything in witchcraft is a truth from God perverted. Like all of it, it all comes back to like
Well, that's what
this.
Satan does. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what Satan, right? With
yeah.
everything, right? Yeah.
He doesn't have any new ideas. Satan doesn't have any new ideas. He takes truth and twists it for his own purposes. And so there's this threefold law, so that anything you send out comes back to you in threefold. And so I didn't get into the cursing side and think, because there is a world that does that. Uh, and so there were definitely spells. My family was in turmoil. So there's a lot of turmoil in my house, and then you add the turmoil of, there's this idea of like appeasing the spirits. So there's a lot of appeasing, like trying to get peace. So I was actively trying to find peace, and wisdom, I would say, were the two things that I use those spells to mostly pursue.
So you
Um,
thought, can I just pause you for, because
yeah.
I've brought this up in a number of interviews
Mhm.
on this season of the podcast, because you were saying before, like the white witchcraft, and then there's sort of the dark, all of it is evil, but you don't
Yes.
realize it. I think a lot of people assume that when somebody goes into witchcraft, their intentions are malicious, right? That you're
Yeah.
going in to do these things. And I do think it's important to highlight so that we understand it, that that's actually not what everybody believes who's in it. A lot of people believe they're using this to do the right thing in their eyes, right? Does that
Absolutely.
make sense? I wanted to
Oh
just
yeah. No.
highlight that.
Fully.
Yeah.
And it's I it when I got saved later, like it was a rather stunning revelation that what I was messing with. Well, so it started off really, I will say that my journey, if you kind of look at it, the whole journey of witchcraft, it started off great. Like it was actually good. And I felt this, I mean, it wasn't real peace, not the peace that passes understanding that I learned of later, but it was a measure of peace, this measure of control over your world, which at the core of it, that's really what it is. You're trying to control the circumstances around your world, whether that be the relationships or the what's happening around you, circumstances, wisdom, those kinds of things. It's a control thing. You're trying to control your world, and none of it ever was scary to me. There was nothing ever scary about it for a long time until it changed. And this is the biggest thing that I wish I could communicate on a grander scale to, especially to teenagers, is that the enemy is all about seduction. He is no different than, he doesn't come in with this big evil intention and this bad thing, and that, where you feel it's alluring. It's a slow luring in, and it's like, oh, look at this power. Look at what's available to you. Look at this. Like there's so many like very seductive pieces about it that it lures you really, really deep in, and then it turns on its head. And that's what happened to me, was that it was like all these spirits that I thought I was messing with, that I thought were good and that were guiding me. Like I had the whole guardian spirit thing and all of that kind of stuff. I really felt like these were good spirits that were helping me.
Did
Okay.
you
And that they were,
communicate with them? Did you pray to them, and did they communicate back? That's something that I'm curious about.
um, I would never, I don't even know what the right term, I don't even know what witches use anymore. And I can't remember. I would have not used the word pray. I would have used connected, probably. Probably, that where there's a connection. I felt like things did change based on those connections. Things happen, and of course you draw the line back to, okay, so this is working, or this is not working, and I need more of this and everything else.
So you weren't
And
hearing them at first, but I know there's a point where you do hear a message, a turning point where you do hear a message, I
yeah,
believe.
no, that one
Yeah.
was that one
Okay.
was so strong that I believed it. Do you know what I mean? By that point, like it was like I had felt like I was being guided, in kind of a non-verbal way necessarily. You would often ask questions, and look for signs, whether that's the way the candle, I had candles blow out for no reason, like things like that, where it's like, okay, that's the sign that what I was saying was true, or what I was asking, or those things. But it was all felt very good for a long time. And then all of a sudden it didn't. And I don't know why it turned. I can't necessarily, other than there was more desperation for me because my dad at that time um, had started getting into heroin, cocaine, one of them. Like, he was using drugs and
Serious
was,
and serious drugs that would alter.
yeah,
Which do you feel, and I wanna hear you talk about that, and sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask this question. Did you feel that the spiritual issues in the home that you guys were engaging in added to that, his, search for those drugs or his use of those drugs? Did you feel like those things interacted at all?
I do, because I do believe, and it's so funny because I lost. So I left that home to go to college. While that my freshman year of college, and I went, I guess in August of that time. I never went back to that house because my parents foreclosed. They lost the house basically. They foreclosed, and I went through a whole week where I didn't even know where my family was. Like, nobody was answering the phone. It was disconnected. I had no idea. And then when I went home for Thanksgiving break, my very freshman year, my semester of my freshman year, they had moved to a different house. So I had never, like, it's like I had no, like, this house was kind of torn from me. And a year ago, I a year ago, I went back to my hometown with my husband. We went on an anniversary weekend, and I went by the house, because we always go by the house if we're near there and stuff like that. But this time, I kind of like steeled myself, and I walked up the driveway, and I was like, I need to walk inside this house. I need to go inside this house and see this house again, because I had not been there since I was 17 years old. And I had this weird, and of course I got saved and all this stuff happened, and it didn't go back. And I will tell you, when I went through that house again, I was like, yeah, yeah, it's something's going on here. Like, I could just
You
still
still felt you
feel
still
it.
felt that.
I could feel it. And I wasn't scared because
You
they
don't
can't
need to be as a
nothing can
Christian.
touch me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
They have no power over me. But I went back there and I was like, and I had this moment where I was like, because it's now like a bed and breakfast or something like that. And so you can actually stay in those rooms. And my
Oh
husband was like,
gosh.
we could come back here and we could spend the night here. And I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
spending the night here.
Yeah, I'm never
Um,
sleeping here again. Yeah.
yeah, no. And so there really was something there. And yes, you could, yeah, I could probably get into fun theological discussions about whether things, demons can attach to places. And I do think that they probably can. There's no reason for us to think that they can't, is the kind of thing, that the way I look
Yeah.
at it.
Well, and I think it stems from, and my biggest thing when I was working on Playing with Fire was to say, okay, everything I look at, I want to make sure there's something in scripture I can point to
Yeah,
say. Now that becomes challenging on some of the infestation stuff,
yeah,
but at the same time, we're not told, And I think we know when we read the entirety of scripture, right? The
Yeah.
activities you were engaging in, that's something that would open a door, right? There's
Right.
lots of other activities like that. We're not told in the New Testament how any one of those individual people who Jesus healed and who Paul healed,
Yeah.
how they became possessed. We're
Right.
not told that information. But I think, again, we have ideas of how that happens. I think the same kind of goes for the infestation part of this conversation. We have an idea of how it works in people, and
Right.
so it doesn't seem like that far of a stretch in light of all of the stories we have like this,
Yeah.
to say that it could be in a place as well.
Yeah. No, I fully believe that there was stuff there. And I do think that, in witchcraft there are definitely things that, like, if you go back into histories and things like that, like, where people like declare a place. So land is very important to God. Okay, so there are territories. There are, when we talk about principalities and that are over certain areas and things like that. So if there can be a principality that is over an authoritative area of our culture, then how is it any different that there can be a territorial principality that is over a region or over something even smaller that was invited, opened up, because they don't have authority unless, well, they do have authority, but once we have authority, they can't take our authority unless we give it to them. So it's like this, there's a lot of
Hierarchy of
authority
power.
issues.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
so your I know that your dad, he got into drugs,
Hmm.
your relationship started to sever, and you started to
Yeah.
not trust him. There was one moment that you shared in your testimony where he was, I'm assuming he was high, dealing with maybe some of these spiritual issues at the same time, I don't know,
Yeah.
where he pointed a gun at you and didn't realize who you were.
Yeah.
Um, would you say, obviously that's a traumatic moment, was that sort of the moment where you knew, I guess, how did that moment affect you? I don't wanna speak for you, so I'll let you reflect on that.
Um, So I think because the witchcraft had kind of connected me with my dad over the years, then when the drugs came in, it separated him again. And so that was scary all on its own, that it was happening. And I was like 15, so like I didn't even really totally understand what was happening. But I it was it was it was the most terrifying moment of my life. Like I really I actually he had like 3 guns with him at the time, and my mother had left with my younger sister to take her somewhere safer, but had left me there. And I did, and I didn't understand what was going on. I had been left there. I knew that he wasn't in his right mind. Like I it was he had taken a metal raw I don't even know where he got it. Some sort of metal rod, and had destroyed the bathroom, like taken it to the shower, to the cabinets, to the mirrors, like destroyed the bathroom because he thought spirits were coming, or things were people. I don't know what he thought they were, but something was coming out of the cabinets, and he was trying to kill them. And so that had all happened like before he even held the gun to me. And so when he turned and pointed the gun at me, I had this moment where I was like, and he did not know who I was at all. And of course, he had been thinking that there were intruders this whole time. So I was an intruder, I guess. And I think I had this moment, and you have to remember, like, I think like things were so bad and I was so lost that I think that this is probably what tripped me into, I don't know that I want to live anymore. Because I did have this moment where he pointed the gun at me, and I was like, it was scary, but at the same time, I was like, okay, if this is what's going to happen, then so be it.
Wow.
And so so I do think that kind of triggered that, because I do think there's spirits attached to suicide, so there's a whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
That,
that is a
yeah,
whole conversation, and
yeah,
I think that, well, I mean, if the
yeah,
enemy's goal is to kill, steal, destroy,
absolutely,
confuse, when we
yeah,
see those things in our culture and in our lives,
yeah,
the idea that there would be an attachment to that in some way, evil is attached to those things, right?
yeah.
And seeks those things. So, how long after the gun incident were you hearing and starting to feel that prompting? And by the way, this prompting to end your life is something that shows up in almost every story that I've
Wow.
interacted with anyone on, which struck me. And that's why when you talked about suicide, as I was telling people stories, and they all started in different places, they all ended up at some point there. And that shocked, I don't know why it shocked me, but just to continue to hear that without telling people that, right? I wasn't telling people, like I just told you, that they
Yeah.
were sharing that. And I thought, wow. So take me through how long that was away from that moment where he held the gun.
Um, probably probably less than probably less than a year. It's a little fuzzy. But he the the incident with the gun happened, and then and he was so he was using with drugs. So there was a I would constantly be looking at his arms to see if he was still using and to see if the bruising was there and stuff like that. To know, because it like shattered my trust in him, like shattered it, and and he was literally the only person in my life that I did trust before that. So like losing that trust, like I was lost, and so but because I had this altar in my room and the witchcraft stuff, I was like, okay, I'm going to just dig down here, and because this is my safe place. I saw that as a safe place. Only I think because of what I saw with my dad, I think it was scarier to me all of a sudden, and I started to I think about that time is when I started having the really scary dreams. And like imagine not seeing stuff like with my natural eyes necessarily, but feeling like that I was aware of scary presences. Because nothing had felt scary to that point, but it started to get scary, and that's where it started. And so I would try to like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing something right, to because these spirits are angry. Why are they angry? What's happening? Like I was seeking, like I was aware of the shift, but I didn't know why the shift had happened, and I assumed I was doing something wrong, and so I kind of doubled down with all of it because it was the only place I had to go.
And it's like, let me appease them so they stop tormenting me in my sleep. Let me appease them so I
Yeah,
like let me turn it back. I could see how
yeah,
you would feel that in that moment. Now you get to that point where you feel this voice telling you
yeah,
the only way to heal yourself is to kill yourself, essentially, right? And
yep,
so and that
yep,
was something you heard, you
yeah,
felt.
yeah.
So what happened from there then once you heard that and felt that?
Um, well, at first, so again, twisted truth, right? Because we die to ourselves, right? So but it was to have a new life, you have to die. You have to have a new life, because that's what I wanted. I wanted my life to a new life, like something like this was not working. I needed something new. Um, and so I heard that, and my first reaction was a little bit of fear of like, could I really do that? Like, is that like, wow, that, because it was so surprising to me, I think, to kind of hear that so strongly. But at the same time, I'd been doing it for so many years at that point that I was like, well, it has to be true then. That has to be true. And I think um um I definitely had to work up the courage to do it. Like I don't think I was in this place where that was an easy decision necessarily.
Sure.
I think I had to like, it was like I had to let that idea sink in and be like, yeah, yeah, that's right. And of course I'd had these other encounters over the time of like, yeah, that makes sense. Like it just kind of like all made sense. And I was like, okay. And it's like I took that thought in and played with it and was like, turned it over and was like, yeah, 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 this is it. This is what I'm going to do. But I definitely think that the continued chaos in my family, the continued uncertainty if my dad was still using, and this I by the time I was trying to commit suicide, there was a lot of fear over losing the house and money, and they were borrowing money from me, and there's stuff going on that they did not tell me the truth about. So I actually I don't know all the details of what was actually happening. But I knew that that stuff was happening. There was financial problems again and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of chaos. And I think like I remember walking out of my house and getting in my car and thinking, better now than ever. Like just this is good. Like let's do this now. And so I did. It wasn't like some huge event. It was sort of like this compiled stuff that eventually, like, I walked out that day and I was like, I'm not coming back. This is, I'm gonna trust the spirits and do this. Yeah. So
And so you failed, obviously. Thankfully,
I did.
you were not able to do it. But
I
that
think I was
also
rescued. I honestly think I was rescued because I woke up. I don't remember stopping my car. I don't remember getting out of my car. And I do not, like, I literally woke up on the ground next to a tree. So I fully believe an angel got me out of that car. I fully believe.
were you trying to have a car accident? Was that sort of the way you were that this was gonna happen for you?
No, I had a very old car that had a carbon monoxide leak, and it always leaked, and so you had to leave airflow all the time. So you just kept the windows like cracked even in the winter. Just kind of kept the airflow going because it was a very old car. And so what I did was I just stopped up all the stuff and drove until
And you woke
I
up outside the car. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
like, yeah, and my car was up on a curb too. So, and it's a stick shift. So like once it kind of went up on the curb, it kind of stalled and died, I guess. It didn't even hit the tree. It was kind of like up on the curb next to the tree. It wasn't like, but my car door was when I woke up, I was on the ground and my car door was open, and it took me a few minutes to remember what had happened and like why I was on the ground and like any of that. So I don't remember turning into the park that park area either. And so yeah, so I woke up and I was like, and it didn't work. And of course, I think I was being affected by the carbon monoxide because I didn't know what to do other than to just go home. It was like I couldn't even fathom what had happened, and the failure of it didn't kind of hit me until a little bit later that I messed up. I didn't do it. And I actually had some other attempts that summer that were, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't drowning yourself in an ocean is really hard to do. Just
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
say, like,
there's yeah, but
yes,
the fact that
I had a few of those. So
it had so affected you to this point that you were
yeah,
trying to take your life. Now, what's so crazy about your story, you end up going off to college, as you mentioned. You had 2 Christian roommates,
yes.
and you end up coming to Christ. And I mean, what when you look at your life before and that coming to Christ, like how did it change you? And I know it's almost a silly question because but I'm
Yeah.
so intrigued, those 2 different polar opposite worldviews. How did
Mm.
that change you?
You know, you know, I really did think my roommates were aliens. I had never, there were a few Christians in my high school that definitely had talked to me, and I didn't really recognize what they did until after I'd gotten saved and can kind of look back and be like, oh, that's what they were talking about, like, kind of thing. So I had people try to witness to me and talk to me over the years. But going to this intervarsity meeting and after like months of them inviting me and all of that, like that intervarsity meeting, I still like I still remember the whole sermon. Like, it's been 30 some years now, and because it was about altars. And he talked about altars, and he talked about the Elijah altar with the prophets of Baal, and then they talked about the Isaac altar and Abraham sacrifice or about to sacrifice Isaac, and he talked about the idea of what an altar was. And he it, it, if you think of mistruth as something crooked, okay, then when truth comes in, it's like things straighten, and then it's like you can see it and see all the crookedness. And I at that moment I was like, I knew that I knew that I knew that I was like, if that is true, what he is saying, if that is true, then that means all these things were off. like they were close. I could see, I was after the truth. And when I was on Tyra Banks, when she invited me on she invited me on a show all about witchcraft and Satanism and all this other stuff. And then I was like the one rebuttal witness. And that was the thing I said at the very end of me sharing on there, was that like, I was searching. I wanted truth. I wanted things that were true. And I fully believed that what I had found in witchcraft was true. And it was like, when I heard that sermon, it was like, I realized that I was like, oh, I had it. It was off. That was off. Like, if this is true, then this was off. And maybe this is the truth that I've always been looking for. And,
Wow.
and so I, my prayer of salvation was literally like, if that is true and you really want me to be yours, then I'll be yours. Like,
In a lot of ways, it's almost like so much, it was just off over here. Like, it's off. You realize it's off. In
yeah,
some ways, I know in my mind, and I can't speak for you, it's like, oh, how could you make that transition? But I could almost see how the adjustment of it would be
yeah,
easy in some ways to realize, oh, I just had it. Like, this is what I need to do. How
yeah.
did your life change once you did that?
So all right. So when you come out of the world, and the kind of the world that I was in, and of course I didn't even really have, like, I didn't have any spiritual foundation. Like, I still remember reading the Beatitudes for the first time and my roommates laughing at me because I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I read it out loud to them. They're like, yeah, that's the Beatitudes. We got to know that one. It's like, but to me, that was like, whoa, that was a really cool, it's a really cool sermon. But it was like mind blowing to me because I had no understanding of any of it. And, never read the Bible, never read any of it. But I will say that, like, while I was fully in, like, I was in, I was like, okay, I do believe that I had messed up in my journey of searching for this truth, that I kind of went over here and that wasn't it. But I think this is really it. I would say that there, not to be over dramatic, but I would say that there was a war for my soul for 4 years, through college. It was a very, very difficult time.
Ephesians
And
6 again. I mean, if like
yeah,
we're in this, and this is
yeah,
something that is, and especially somebody like you who came out of that world, you were engaging with evil, right? Not
hmm,
realizing at the time what it was, that it was going to want to not let you go,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is
No,
the
it was,
last thing it would want.
yeah, it was bad. And my family was furious with me. My mom wouldn't even speak to me. My dad, they basically threatened to disown me, and cut me off
Over Christianity, over
over
becoming
Christianity. My dad saw it as me, like, he saw Christianity as like stupid. So, like, you have to imagine, like, this is the journey with my dad. Like, I found something that connected with him, deeply connected with him over witchcraft. And then all of a sudden, when I became saved, like, it was like anathema to him, that because he was like, I taught you better than this. Like, I raised you to be better than
right.
this. Like, this is like, it was betrayal to him that I had become a Christian. And he was furious for a long time. And I went through a season where I wasn't, I think I was nervous because, like, I was in college, I was living down there, and I did want to continue going to school, and so I didn't want them to cut me off financially because then I'd have to drop out of school, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do then. And it wasn't until I found a home church, that I started going to and then being discipled in. I actually credit that home church, for everything, because it laid a foundation under me that I don't think a regular church would have ever done. And I don't know that I would have been able to really come out of what I came out of, because there's so much false thinking. There's so much um, stuff that just messes with you, and the whole identity. Like, I needed so much healing. I needed so much healing, and I still, like, God's still healing me. Like, it never stops. God continually heals us. But, like, that section of time, during college, those 4 years of college, because I got saved like first semester. Those 4 years of college were this journey of figuring out what's true. And I did a lot of things that I didn't know were bad. Like, there was all these Christians in college, and they were saying that they were Christians, but they weren't living what the scriptures were saying. And me not knowing the rules and the etiquette in the Christian world, I was just like, well, why do you say you're a Christian if you don't do this? Like, I
Right.
thought we were supposed to do these things. And then
Yeah.
people get really mad at me for saying those things. And so like, I had a lot of people not like me and everything else. Cause I was like, but the scriptures say this, like what aren't we supposed to do? Like, we're not supposed to be sleeping with your boyfriend, right? Like, because you're not supposed to do that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I had problems with friends at school with the Christians and trying to get myself, well, I didn't even do it myself. It was that discipleship that I had, like really, really discipleship. I definitely still struggled with thoughts of suicide all through college, I would say. It took a while for that to completely go away because that is like this dog. It's like a dog. It's like a thing that it's so hard to end that. And it did eventually get fully healed from that.
Yeah, and
And
that's a
yeah,
common experience. That is a
yeah,
common experience that I've heard, with this. And I mean, for you, some people they accept Christ and they start living, and it's like an instant thing. For a lot of people, it's not. And I think that's a
yeah,
misconception that people have, right? And also like saying a prayer once doesn't, absolve you of any other. And I think sometimes we teach it that way. And so when you're on a journey like yours, that's a journey. It's going to take some time to
yeah.
get through that. My last question for you, and I don't know if you want to answer it, and if it's too personal, you don't have to. But did your family ever find healing? Did other members of your family ever heal from this?
So my through college, I would say by my senior year or something, I went to I wanted to go to Haiti on a missions trip with my college, and that missions trip was actually, kind of this. It was kind of one of those really difficult things because I really, really felt like I needed to go. I really wanted to go on this missions trip, and my family was very against it. And the pastors at the church were like, "Well, if your family doesn't agree, you have to honor your father and your mother." And I'm like, they don't believe. Like they're never like
Right. Yeah, they're
if
not going to
I
agree with
do
anything
that,
I do. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if I do that, I will never go anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they don't even want me to be here in this church. So like, so the whole honor your father and your mother thing, I wasn't against, but I was like, does it apply in this situation? Like I am an adult. Like
Yeah.
I can still honor them without agreeing with them and choosing to do something as an adult. Anyway, it was this whole thing over this trip to Haiti, and my mother would like cut out articles about unrest in Haiti and mail them to my with nothing, no note, no nothing. Just send me these articles, stuff like that. It was like the old like Twitter thing. And so there was all this stuff, and it was, but it became a turning point. My dad, when I left for Haiti, when I did finally end up going, and when I left, when he dropped me off at the airport, he said, "I'm proud of you." And it basically became this. And again, my dad was a man of few words in these situations. He was not good at talking about anything internal. Like he talked about other stuff all the time, but not internal stuff. He said he was proud of me. And it was like a truce, I would say. We just agreed to disagree on all of this stuff. And I would say that is where we stayed for many years. He didn't, he told me I'd never find a husband, that church is never going to help you. Da, da, like he would still say stuff like that to me. I did find a husband and, did get married and, did all that stuff. And he just chose to kind of, we stayed in our lanes, and I would definitely talk to him some, but I couldn't get much out of him. Um, at one point, and this was so one summer, it was in 2004. I was doing some research. I'd written my first book, and was looking back on my past a little bit, and I was like, Dad, I was like, I really just want to understand, what is it that you actually believe? Do you believe in reincarnation? Because I think he believed in reincarnation, but I'm like, how does reincarnation fit in with witchcraft? And what does this mean? And, da, da, da. And I was like, really, really like drilling him on trying to understand what do you actually believe, like, and what those things are. And so we had these interesting conversations that summer, again, not getting anywhere necessarily, but like we had these interesting conversations. I was able to get more out of him than I had ever been able to. And that October, so that had happened during the summer. He has a summer birthday. We went up there to see him. That October, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and stage 4. And that diagnosis, like, broke him in half. Like he honestly was never the same after the diagnosis. He only lived 3.5 weeks from the
Wow.
diagnosis to his death. I spent a lot of that time up there with him, and it was interesting because during that summer, I made a case for what I believed at the same time that I was pressing him for what he believed. And when we had these really good conversations that summer. And when the time came, my dad basically didn't want to, he just shut down. He just shut down emotionally, he shut down mentally. He just didn't want to talk to anybody. And thankfully I knew at that point that I was like, I have said everything to this man that I can say. Like I know that I've been very honest about me and what I believe now. We've talked about his beliefs and why I think that those aren't that this is true and not what he's saying. Um and I was with him the whole time. At one point before he was able to stop speaking, he I was sitting there and he patted my hand and he was like, I took care of it all. And I was like, excuse me? What does that mean? Yeah, I need a lot more information
Right.
than that, Dad.
Like, yeah, tell me
Like
what you mean.
what does that mean? What do you mean you took care of it? Because it was something about like he had met with a pastor who I didn't know, so I don't really actually know like what denomination it was or like I don't know. He met with somebody though, and that was his response was I took care of things, and I was like, I, can we do it again here so I can have some reassurance? I don't know. Um, but he definitely had indicated that there was at least some of that. And then I was with him when he died. I had been singing just some worship songs and just kind of sitting there with him, praying for him. He wasn't communicating at that point. He had not been able to even like he couldn't even see at that point. He was definitely hearing things though, because he would turn to the sound of your voice. And I can talk about it like this now because it really has been about 15 years. But like this was a big, big, big thing of like just kind of basically when he died, I feel like he had every opportunity to get things right with God. I don't know that he did, but I know that I know that I know that he had every opportunity, and so I feel like I have the hope of possibility that he did, which is basically all I could ask for at that point. And for me, that was enough. Like it was enough that like I don't know what this man chose to do in the end, but I think that he might have. And so that happened like 14 years ago, and mm, yeah, the rest of my family, nobody wants anything to do with what I am, what I do now, but
Yeah.
that's okay because like and I think I'm thankful for my dramatic testimony because like I really do like I have moments where I'm constantly going back to like I should be dead. I would have been dead with it if it were not for God, and so to me, like I can hang on to that and be like, even if this doesn't happen, even if this doesn't happen, like I would have been dead without him. Like I was truly transferred from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And like that, just the fact that that happened, God has done more than enough for me. And so I like nothing can change that. And so even though I would love for my family to understand that, you know, they don't, and I can only be who I am.
All you can do is be who you are and pray, and, I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing this. I took way more of your time than I said I was going to, so I owe you a
Yeah.
massive apology now.
No,
But
it's okay. I'm sorry. I probably talked too much. I
no, you didn't.
apologize.
I mean, these stories are essential for people to tell, and they're not stories you can really tell in 20 minutes. I mean, they're just not. There's so much to unpack, and I appreciate you taking the time today. If people want to find out more about you and your journey and your story, is there a website they can go to or a place you want to send them?
SarahAnneSumpolec.com. There's a little bit up there. I've changed it so many off the years and trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with it, but it's there. So
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. That's all for today's Playing with Fire podcast. Again, I'm Billy Hollowell. If you want more information on this topic, if you want to understand what evil is, what Scripture tells us, and how we can navigate this crazy, difficult issue in our culture today, in our lives today, and what it means to have freedom in Christ, check out Playing with Fire, a modern investigation into demons, exorcism, and ghosts. You can go to billyhollowell.com for more information. You can also find the book on Amazon or wherever books are sold. I will see you next week for another episode of the show, and be sure to check out Edify, Edifi. This show is on the Edify Podcast Network, and the Edify app is an amazing place to go for daily content, daily podcast content that will leave you feeling edified. It's Edifi in the App Store. Download the app today and come back next week for another episode of Playing with Fire.